So we're doing the sixth episode for this series, the final one where we're gonna ship our application and deploy it using Vercel. What we've done so far is we've seen how web apps work end to end, from APIs to front-end inputs to the basics of JavaScripts and Supabase, which is saving your data on like a scalable database service, how version control works. So if you're new to this series, I would recommend checking out the first few episodes so that you can understand end to end what we've built so far. And in the past few weeks, we have been building a mood quote application, which is simply an app that gives you a quote based on your mood right now. So we'll do a brief demo of what we've built so far. And a few key insights from the previous episode is about APIs and how to keep your API keys and environment files secure and safe using Git, and then how Supabase works to store your user data on uh, a scalable database service, which is like an industry standard. So a brief recap of what we covered last time. Um, our backend tech stack for this application is Supabase for storing data, API like Zen quotes for pulling real quotes on the basis of the mood input, and Vercel to deploy our application. And a brief overview of APIs would be about what are GET requests and POST requests. So think of GET requests when you are asking a service for something, and POST requests is when you are sending something to be saved. So in our case, fetching a quote from an application from a service like Zen quotes would be a GET request, but saving that quote in our database would be a POST request. So that's the brief distinction there. So if you're pulling something from the system, it's a GET request, and if you're pushing something into the system, it's a POST request. This is a free guide from our last episode where I gave a demo of how to create a Supabase project, how to create a table on Supabase, how to access your API keys and use them in your code, how the whole flow works from your front-end input to your external API, and eventually saving your favorite quote in the database. So the learning goals for our sixth episode are these, which is before you deploy an application, what practices you need to take and what is the best way to deploy an application. We're going to use Vercel, which is an industry standard for, it's a platform to deploy web applications. There are other options too, which we'll go over, but I'll give you a brief overview of why we use Vercel. And once we've deployed our application, we will test it in a live environment, which is in the browser. And before we start, I wanted to show you why we chose Tailwind and ShadCN. So Tailwind is a CSS library which allows you to do some styling quickly and not have to worry about it yourself. So it also has like integration with your Next.js application and other tools like Framer for motion animation and things like that. ShadCN UI is a library which gives you components out of the box so that you can just directly use form inputs or buttons or things like that. And in our case, we've used it for grid layouts and card components. Let me quickly show you um, what it looks like in our case. So I'm going to go show you the code base. And if you want to check where exactly shadcn and Tailwind is coming from. So I'm in my package.json file, and here you can see we've used Tailwind for CSS. And if you want to check for components, we're going to go to components.json. And if you look here, we are using shadcn. So that's one way to check. And I'm going to briefly show you one thing about Cursor, which is these are all our past chats. And if I click on view all, it's going to show me what I've done in the past 2 weeks. So we did a Next.js app setup for this application. We did some error troubleshooting. We we did an inquiry of how to run our application from the code base, and we implemented feature by feature, and we also like used the ask mode of Cursor to understand what is the difference between a div and a section. And 2 days back, we added Superbase API keys, and we also integrated Zen quotes with our API. So let me open this in our browser. So this is our application, and it has dark mode and light mode. And what it essentially does is you can provide a mode input, say happy, and you can select get quote, and a quote will appear. And then if you like that quote and you want to favorite it and save it in your database, you can click favorite, and it has been saved. One way to expand on this application after is maybe once you've saved something, you can use your code base to have like a panel where you can have like a list of favorite quotes be displayed. But let me show you that once we saved, was it actually saved in the database? So I have Superbase open here, and I'm going to refresh it. And this is the quote that we just added. So we've saved the author, we've saved the quote, and we've saved the mode that was selected. And we have a favorites table set up here. So I'm going to go back here. So this is how we used Tailwind CSS and shadcn. And we have an end-to-end product of how to use like a mode code generator application. And then once it's generated, you can see in the code base that we have an API route, which pulls from Zen quotes. It's an external API source. And we have another route, which is essentially saving the quote into a favorites table in the database. So most of this code was generated by the AI agent, and it was simply done by prompting. So I would highly recommend checking out like the previous episodes if you want to know how we got this far. Um, One key thing about building a product is having some clarity about what mode you're operating in. In terms of like Cursor, we have something called agent mode and ask mode, which is agent is basically about building something, and ask mode is about brainstorming. But for builders like us, we have to think and scope things in a very clear manner. So like this is just like a mindset one should have, where if you want to brainstorm ideas, you can use Cursor's ask mode. If you want to execute, you can use the agent mode. And maker mode is just like a mindset for like deep design or coding sessions. And manager mode is a mindset for like planning your MVP and building iteratively. And next up is before we go to deployment, let me talk briefly about why we're choosing GitHub and Vercel. So we have options like Bolt, Lovable, V0, and these are great for prototyping tools. But the thing is, it requires a lot of configuration in your code base itself. So to deploy a production-ready application, you need version control like Git, and you have to take care of environment files and environment variables and API keys. And Vercel makes this very simple and very step-by-step. Um, the bigger picture here is that if you want to deploy an MVP, which is a minimum viable product, you can use things like Vercel, Railway, or Fly.io. But at scale or in production, you're going to have to use AWS, Docker, or Kubernetes. These are orchestration tools to deploy applications on a scale. But if you're doing MVPs, you should stick to Vercel, Railway, or Fly.io. But the thing is, once you understand how to do things in Vercel, it's easier to apply it anywhere else. So before we go and deploy this application, um, what Vercel actually is it's a hosting platform for our web app. So it was developed by the team who made Next.js. It's a framework for modern applications, and it works perfectly for static sites and full stack apps that don't have very resource heavy tools on them. So in our case, for our mode code generator application, we have two endpoints, which is get quotes and favorite a quote. So it fits perfectly for our use case. Before you deploy your web application, you have to make sure that you run these tests. First is a linting check, which is basically catching any syntax errors or formatting issues in our code base before they become bugs and then break our application in production. Building our application makes sure that it compiles correctly before we push it live. So if you not used proper syntax, your code would break it on npm run build. So it's just if it works on npm run dev, doesn't necessarily mean that it will work on npm run build as well. So it's best to run these checks before you deploy your application. And lastly, because we're going to use Vercel, we have to make sure that the code we push to GitHub is updated and latest. So let me go back to Cursor and let's run these checks before we deploy. So I'm going to close the server and I'm going to hit clear. And let me run npm run lint. So it looks like the lint check was okay. Let me run it again. Yep, so this is a successful lint check. Let me show you a case where this could be an error. So const example string. So in this case, what's happening is if you look here, this variable is not being used. It's declared, but it's not used. It's not impacting our application in any way. So now if I run the lint check, it's going to prompt me that example, this variable is assigned a value, but never used. So the lint check takes care of things like that. And if I do something like this is a number, but I'm attaching a string to it and I run npm run build, my application won't build. So it's creating an optimized production build, but it will fail because it realized that the lint check has also failed and you're assigning a string to a number type. So this is an example of a lint check or a build check that would fail. So I'm going to remove that and let's go back and run the lint check first. And then let's run the build check. Okay, I think that was good. Let's run our application in the browser again. I think that looks good. Let me go back and check if any code has been changed. So it looks like we have the updated code on GitHub, so we don't need to push anything again. It's all updated. So if we have changed any code, it will be displayed here. So let me go back. and see. Okay, so we've done the lint check, we have done the build check, and we've also pushed to GitHub. The next step is to deploy this application. So we're going to go to Vercel and we're going to import this mode quote repo from GitHub and follow these steps. So let me go to Vercel. This is the Vercel dashboard. I've logged in with my GitHub. I'm going to create a new project and I'm going to import the mode quote application from my GitHub. So if you look here, it has already figured out that we have a Next.js application. I didn't have to actively select it, but if we are using a different application, it will auto-select it. So in our case, this is okay. And yeah, we just go ahead and deploy it. But before that, we want to make sure that we have the environment variables. So environment variables are something that is used for our API and our database. So we did not need any API keys to work with Zen codes, but we needed API keys to talk to Supabase to save our favorite codes. So I'm going to grab these environment variables from the root folder of my application, and it's in this file. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it in Vercel. So I'm going to go here and hit paste. So now we have two environment variables. I copied and pasted it directly from my environment file, and I'm going to click deploy. So it looks like it's being deployed. So this should pass as long as you have checked on your local that npm run build was working. So let's let this run in parallel and go back to our slides and we can come back to it. So these were the steps that we followed. We logged into Vercel with our GitHub account. We created a new project. We imported our repo. It was able to auto detect Next.js. We added our environment variables from the env file, and then we deployed it. And the next step is to test your release, and let's see if our deployment. Yep, so great. So it has been deployed. You just deployed a new project. And the next step is to create branches, add a domain. So right now the domain would be the Vercel domain. So let's see if we can open this application. So this is our domain modequote.vercel.app. So yeah, that's it. So if you now our application is deployed on a different site. It has its own URL, modequote.vercel.app. Let's check the flow. It looks like it works. And then if I favorite the quote, let's see if this quote was saved in mode quote. Yeah, it looks like there's the author, there's the quote, there's the mode. Great. So we have deployed our application. And if you look here, there's a lot of configuration that you can do. You can deploy it on GitHub branches. You can see like analytics about how many visitors and things like that. But you were able to deploy this for free. But once you want like more features, I think you have to like have the pro version for Vercel. But in terms of integration, it was pretty smooth. And yeah, the next step would be to check the browser console for any hidden errors. You can check it on your mobile phone as well, because now that you have a URL, you can just open that in your phone and check if it works, if it is responsive. Yeah, the key takeaways for today were you need to have version control, which is Git or GitHub. And you also need an environment setup, which is having a .env file. in your code base. And if you look here, this .env file is not highlighted. It's because it is supposed to be hidden, and you should never push these values to GitHub. And how you take care of that is you have a .gitignore file in your code base, and you add this line .env star, which tells GitHub that any file in this code base that starts with .env, we should not push it to GitHub, because this is a private variables that you should keep it to yourself, and you should not share it on in a public repo. And yeah, tools like Cursor and Vercel help speed things up for us. And another key takeaway from not just this series, but generally for like building with AI, is to make sure that you don't outsource. It's not possible yet to outsource judgment and empathy, but I would highly recommend that before like involving yourself with tools like MCP and things like that, you make sure that you give access and control to only tools that you trust. So there will be a lot of new tools that will be released in the upcoming future, but make sure that you don't outsource judgment and decision making. We can use AI as a tool, but it is helpful to use it as a tool only and build on top of it, and not outsource your creativity. And with that, I think we have some free guides that I've put together for this series. This is the first one. This is basically explaining what I went over right now, which is how to deploy a web application. And the second one is how to set up Git and GitHub locally on your computer, and also set up a GitHub profile, some core commands to push your GitHub code to GitHub, and then also be able to pull down, push, and collaborate better with your teammates. This is how to set up Supabase, which is for a database setup, how to create a project, how to get your API keys, how to install the Supabase client in your code base. And this will have like a comprehensive list of all the tools and technologies we've used in this series. And we will also be using these technologies in the upcoming course that we have, which starts on May 20th. And it's a course which will cover most of what we covered in this series, but we'll dive deeper with like demos and exercises, and we'll build like a full stack application end to end, which you can deploy on your own domain. And you can come with your ideas, and we can brainstorm and build something useful together, and then share it live. And yeah, with that, I think if we have any questions